2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining today's Ipsos webinar, Empathy, Real People, Real Life. My name is Martin Femberg and I'm part of Ipsos in Switzerland. If you have any questions during the webinar, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. And now I'm proud and I'm happy that we could introduce April. April will be our presenter today. She is the Global President of Ethnography and Immersion at Ipsos UU, our qualitative unit. Thanks again, April, for joining at this very special week, and I'm looking forward to this inspiring webinar.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. And yeah, it is a special week as I'm here in the US, and I can tell you if there's anything we need here right now is empathy. So it is a very top of mind topic for me personally to be talking about. So thank you. So, as Martin said, we're going to be talking today about empathy and about how stepping into the life of someone else is really a great way to start to begin to have empathy and why that's good not just for us in terms of being good people, but also good for our businesses and what follows. So hopefully you will be able to get to that. I've also included some tips and tricks as we go along here, so that hopefully you'll be able to walk away from this with some ideas as to how you can begin tomorrow to have a little more empathy for the people that you serve. Well, I'm going to start today, though, with a question for you. And I'm going to ask you to go to Mentimeter, go to www.menti.com and answer this question. When was the last time you spent time with the people that use your products and services? And I say spent time almost with some air quotes there because I think we all have different definitions as to what that means. But I'd love to hear, when was the last time you spent time with the people that use your products and services? If you go to www.menti.com and put in that code 7987610, you should see those questions pop up, and there should be a way for you to answer that. So I'd love for you to go. I have two people who've clocked in so far. Can we get everyone to answer the question? When was the last time you spent time with the people that use your products and services? Give everybody a minute to answer that. Not getting too many answers coming in. There we go. Oh, they're starting to come in now. And the way we answer these will actually help me to determine where I focus in this presentation in terms of how often people think they're doing it, how frequent or not frequent they are actually spending time with people. Okay, we've got some things coming in. Others? Can we get others? Here we go. This is quite the horse race. And Martin, I've asked you to please put the code into our chat box in case anyone's still waiting to hear that. Okay, so don't be afraid to stop, guys, but I'm going to go ahead and show you where this is leaning for this particular crowd. So a few people said it's the past week, some said the past year. Looks like the past month is where we are the highest rating. Yeah. So given that, I think we have some opportunity here to spend a little more time with people. And I think that's going to be, first of all, a great way for you to begin to start to have some empathy. But I hope that as we go through this presentation, that you'll start to think about why that's important. So let's start with what I'm going to call a story. I'm going to ask you, what do you see when you see this particular picture? And here you can just put it into the chat box. What are some of the things that you see when you see this family in this particular picture? What do you see? And Martin, if you can help me with things that people are saying in the chat box.
Sure. At the moment, I think the people are a bit shy.
So I need you guys to tell me a little bit about what's going on in this picture.
So there are things like family is raised.
Family, yeah, that's exactly right. Family. And what does family mean to people?
It's like emotion, connection.
Emotion, connection, excellent, great. Those are great, great responses. So things like love, I hear from people. I hear, a future, the idea of a future and the hope for a future. Things like the connection between the three of them and what kind of hope they might have for where things could go, right? So that's what you see now. What I'm going to talk about as we go through this is what it means to pull back and to really start to understand the context of what people are experiencing. So now, when we pull back, what you see changes completely, right? That love gets a hint of fear in there. We see here that the baby is actually sick. She's tied up to a lot of different equipment there. And it's more difficult, right? And how you talk to this family and the things you say to them and the things you might even do for them is very different when you start to think about the context of what it is they are living. So my point that I'm making here is that sometimes changing the context can actually change the picture, can actually change the story, and can actually change what you can do to help or to be a part of the lives of someone in this situation. So let's do it again. My next story is about Agnes. So Agnes is 92. She is celebrating this birthday, and her family threw her this wonderful party to celebrate this. That she's pretty much beat the odds, right? 92, nothing to snuff at, right? But I will tell you that at this party, they served a gluten-free cake. They had a sodium-free chicken dish that she was able to eat, and then they gave her one celebratory glass of wine. Her family is very concerned about making sure that Agnes stays around for 93 and 94 and 95. But when you talk to Agnes specifically, this is who she is. Agnes is forever 18, and she and her girlfriend Doris are secretly plotting an escape to an all-girls vacation in Mexico next summer. So she may be 92 chronologically, but in her heart, in who she is, Agnes is a very different person. And I tell you what, if you try to take the car keys away from this person, she's going to give you a fight for that, right? So it's important that we understand not just what things look like on the surface, but we start to dig a little deeper into who people are and how they're really thinking. So given that, how do you do that? And I will contend that empathy is the answer to how to really start to pull back and understand people better. And as you can see, empathy is actually starting to be used as a verb. We've been empathied, right? And given our current crisis as to what's going on with the pandemic, people in and out, Here's the head of our advertising association here in the US. He says that brands exploring every possible means to remain helpful and relevant to their consumers and making empathy a key part of their decision-making process is a very wise approach. So according to many, somehow injecting empathy in what we do has become even more important than ever. And I would argue that right now there's some fertile ground going on. There's people, there's problems that are being experienced that have never been experienced before, and people need new answers to address those problems. So there's fertile ground for our innovation. And to be honest, people need to feel connected. They need to feel heard, and they need to feel safe. So again, a lot of opportunities here for how we connect and how we communicate with people, and the things that we invent to now deal with the new lives that they are experiencing. So what exactly is empathy? Well, we have a definition here at Ipsos, and it's about being able to think what someone else thinks, able to feel what someone else is feeling, and to be able to do what others can do. Or sometimes being able to not do what someone else is unable to do. It's a way of stepping into the life of someone different than yourself. But it doesn't stop there. So you do those things. And then what we as business people need to do is to add or create value for these people, for the people that ultimately we are serving. And we've actually taken the idea of empathy to a higher level. So it starts with this idea of emotional empathy that I just described. And that means, you know what, I feel your pain. I feel what you're going through. But we ladder that up to, I feel your pain, and now I understand you a little bit better based on having experienced that. And the last step of this is, I feel your pain, I understand you, and now I can do something about it. I can bring my resources and my problem-solving abilities and my perspective on what's going on to help do something about whatever that situation is. So we're going to talk today about not just emotional empathy, but actually bringing that to another level of what we call cognitive empathy. I need to, of course, always add some numbers to this, right? So because this is somewhat of a soft topic, I will tell you there's been many studies that say that companies that score high in empathy tend to do better. There was actually a woman who did a study for the Harvard Business Review a few years ago where she created a global empathy index. And in it, she ranked companies based on how empathetic they were. So how did she do that, right? What's the measure? Well, she used things like the company's ethics. She used their leadership and the things that the leadership said in all of their meetings. She used the perception of the brand and what people were saying on social media, in public. And she also used things like diversity. How diverse was their company at various levels, as well as on their board? And what she found was when she ranked companies, according to this empathy index, the companies that were on the top had a higher value, often twice as much, and they had a higher increase in their average earnings. The ones on the bottom were below by as much as 9%. So there are business reasons to actually inject some empathy into what it is you're doing. In a recent survey of 150 CEOs, most of them recognized empathy as a key to success. And I love bringing up this quote from Tim Cook because, first of all, he was speaking at MIT, which is my alma mater, and I love that he was there. But I love the fact that he is associated with technology, right? But what he talks about is, and what he told people at this graduation ceremony was, people are going to tell you to keep empathy out of your career, to stick with the numbers and stick with the business. But he says it's a false premise. Don't accept it. And if you think about Apple, a lot of what they invent and what they do, if that really has a lot of empathy behind it. So they do live by that. The other thing we'll find is that having empathy not only ties to the financial performance, but it helps within your organizations. So people are more likely to stay with an organization that empathizes with their needs. They're willing to work longer hours, and they're willing to take a pay cut for an empathetic company. It's very interesting. So it goes beyond just the people who buy your products. It goes to the people who make them and who make decisions around them. So it's important to keep this in front of you in everything that you do. So how do we get there? Well, first of all, I would argue you can't start with just the business questions in mind. And what I often do in many of our training sessions is this is the first tip I give people, that you gotta take it away from being about you. We all start a conversation with business questions, right? How do I build penetration? Not a conversation, but at least what's going on in your own agenda. How do I drive volume? How do I increase frequency? How do we establish leadership for the brand, or build a category, or convert, right? How from a competitive product or from a current product. So those are the questions we go into conversations with. But I encourage you, when you talk to people, to think more about people questions, not so much about building penetration, but how do you reassure someone that using your product or service is going to make things better? How do you make things easy for them or build confidence for them? How do you inspire them? Or how do you provide some kind of an experience? It's those kind of questions that can really get you to a more empathetic view, but also get you to products and communications that are more driven towards people's needs and not necessarily just answering our business questions. So this is the Ipsos model for how to create a culture of empathy. We start by initiating some kind of a shift so that people understand this is important and that it's being considered in everything you do. The next part is about connecting and immersing yourself with people, and that's what we're going to focus on more today. And then lastly, I talk about acting and creating value, and that's this idea of moving from emotional to cognitive empathy and ways that we have that we can do that. So here are the steps to get there. You've got to see people, you've got to hear people, you've got to experience people, and then you need to understand what to do from there. And we're going to go through each of these with some examples that hopefully will bring to light what it is I'm talking about here. So the first example is in the see me area, and there is quite a bit of power in this idea of observation. When you observe, you can actually start to compassionately see real people, what they're really doing in their real lives. When you start to observe, you can expose some things that people are often unable to tell you in other circumstances. And you can capture these moments in a very specific way. All of these things lead up to actually revealing what I call human truths. When we survey people, sometimes it's one thing to answer a question. It's another thing to be with someone in that moment and observe what's going on. And often you'll see that what you observe is different than what you say. And frankly, as an ethnographer, when that happens, I consider it gold. Whenever there is something that's dissonant, right? Someone said one thing and they've done something different. To me, there's tension in there. There's a reason why they've kind of lied. And where there's tension, there's always insight, right? So I'm going to show you an example of finding these moments that I was talking about. This is Joseph. Joseph has been home now, at home, away from work. His office has been shut down. He's been at home with his kids, and we've spent a lot of time with Joseph through this time period, and it's just been interesting because he's such a great guy, and he does puppet shows with his children, and he does everything he can to keep everybody happy and upbeat. But by being with Joseph, when he was there at special moments, we actually found a moment that was a little bit different than what we had typically seen from him. Now, I will warn you, I'm going to play you a little video. He's whispering at the time, so you're gonna have to listen a little carefully. But this is a moment that Joseph shared with us that we might not have otherwise seen. So let me move on to that.
Tell you my one true secret. It's a pack of cigarettes. Haven't been a consistent smoker for years, and I plan to not be again, but like a profound feeling to me that I get to just go outside, smoke one cigarette exactly.
So what he says, in case you couldn't hear him, but I'm sure you could observe what was going on there, he says it's a profound moment for him to just go outside and smoke one cigarette. Now, this is something he's sharing with us that he hasn't even shared with his family, right? And he says, I don't plan on doing this later, but right now, after today, I need just a moment to myself. And this is what I'm going to do, right? So it's interesting. Another tip I can give you when you're thinking about this idea of observation, you want to think about context. What was going on? Did you see where he kept his little stack? Did you see like how he was whispering, walking through the hallways, where he went when he went outside, right? Did you see moments? I think this whole moment was just a great example of that. It's a time that he doesn't really share with everyone. It's a private time for him. So look for moments. And then patterns. Is there something that's happening? Like, do we see lots of people as we're starting to do these ethnographies taking these kind of moments out? Now we've got a pattern forming, and it might be a good way to start to think about ways to innovate or ways to communicate with people. Yeah. So that's the see me piece. The other thing you need to do when you're talking about empathy is this idea of hearing and listening, right? And it's what we call deep listening. It's not just hearing what people say, but it goes a little deeper than that. So I have this quote from Carl Rogers, who I think is a great quote. It says, "We think we listen, but very rarely do we listen with real understanding, true empathy. Yet listening of this very special kind is one of the most potent forces for change that I know." So in some ways, this is what we do every day, but I think if you're really conscious about how you listen, that things can really start to be exposed and unveiled. So one of the things that we do here at Ipsos is we have these programs where we allow our clients to connect ongoing with people who use their products and services. And so they're constantly there with them. They're constantly talking to them. They're constantly listening to them and seeing some of the things that are happening. So I'll show you a couple of examples of this. We had a program that we did in Russia that was all about connecting with the beauty consumer, and we had them talk to us about the things that they did and why they did it and the things that were important to them. We did a similar study here in Muslim countries. We did 14 different ethnographic immersions, and we were able to come up with some really deep insights on beauty and what that means to them, given sort of where they are, the situations that they're in. The family situations came up, the idea of the heat and how that played a role in things. There was just so much that we were able to see by being with these 14 different women on an ongoing basis and asking them questions. So if I can give you some tips on listening, there's something that you want to do, which is like temporarily suspending your agenda, right? Keeping the questions open-ended, moving from your discussion guide to the conversation, being spontaneous all the time, and trying to form a connection. And then being naive, right? How can you let go of what you already know and let them tell you. Let them be the expert, which isn't always easy for us as us A-type people, but I found that if you could just be okay with being kind of dumb about it, they can tell you things that you might not have already known. Look for things that are not said and the contradictions like I talked about earlier, and also look for things that that they are evading. Watch for little signs in their faces of what it is they might not be telling you. The other thing I would add, this idea of accepting silence is a great one. I think sometimes I get more from what people aren't saying than I get from what they are saying. So this idea of silence is really a good one. So we've talked about seeing, we've talked about hearing, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about experiencing. So, when you experience what someone else is going through, sometimes you have to force yourself to be in that situation. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of when we did this. One was we did a weekday breakfast immersion program where, in this case, at first we started bringing people into a central location. We fed them breakfast and we were with them as they put together their meals, right? We were with them watching the choices that they made. And then we sat with them and talked about, why they did the things they did in a very relaxed, nice, friendly atmosphere. Then COVID hit. And now we can't bring people together like this anymore. But what we did was we had people send us videos around what's happening during their breakfast and what's happening at the breakfast table. That was really interesting, and we saw some things that were a little bit different than when we had them in a setting that we had created for them. So it was really interesting to be able to see people and be with people and experience what they were experienced both when we were there with them in person and when they were able to show us what was happening in their own experience and in their own words. So that's an example of how you might experience what people are doing. The next example I'm going to show you came about as we were doing our ethnographies uh, during the COVID time. One of our people was a guy named Jordan. Jordan was an actor who was out of work once the pandemic hit. And I'm going to start with a video that we took early on, and where Joseph sort of, Jordan sort of told us a little bit about, how he was feeling about things. So we'll start with that.
I don't want to say desolate, but there's no one here. So there's not really much of a neighborhood feel. One of the great things about being in New York is that I do have this very immediate community that's around me all the time. Up here, I don't. This is my roommate's house. We are currently upstate, about 2 hours outside of New York City. We left for the pandemic. Yeah, it's scary.
So Jordan, in this case, I don't know if you noticed, but he had his rainbow flag up. He told us about how, he was nervous about the U.S. and he talked about his parents a little bit and how they were continuing to be out there. He was worried about them, and he talked about the climate of the U.S. and he said, we're starting to see that healthcare is just not equal, right? There was a disadvantage of being a Black man in the US right now, and the same for his parents that, was playing out in this health pandemic. So that was in early May. By the end of May, we were able to experience something very different from Jordan. And I'm not going to play this whole video, but I will show you the beginning of what he has started to see.
How many Black people gotta die for this shit to happen? How many black people gotta die?
I definitely just got sprayed with tear gas. And this stuff, tear gas ain't no joke. Like, it's crazy.
I don't know if people are looking at this as a solution of anything. I don't think anybody came out here and said, I'm gonna fix the problem.
I think that America is waking up to the reality that we're not a great country just because we're inherently great. We actually have to work for these things.
No, we're not necessarily thinking about that. What's popping in people's mind is, I'm upset, let's come together.
We have had.
So I'm going to stop the video there. You can see the difference in Jordan from when he started, which was a little tentative, not really sure. What you will see as this goes on is Jordan actually starts participating in some of these demonstrations, and you can see him chanting and shouting and moving through the tear gas and things like that. So, I mean, talk about being able to experience things. He was just a wonderful example of what's happening to someone in the midst of a given situation. So, I think that there's great ways to have some empathy for Jordan through this. So what are some of the tips for a real experience? Well, for one thing, we taught these people how to take pictures. We taught them how to take videos. We showed them the best way to do it so that they can upload it to us and have us be able to capture all those things. We also, there's my daughter in the background in case you can't see. We also we started to capture these moments, and so we had them be a little more cognizant of when the moments were happening. We often gave them tasks to do while they were filming for us, and I think part of the tips for a real experience is to make sure you observe what's going on around people, just as we talked about in the beginning, as we start to move through this experience of what it is that's happening. So moving from now we've seen, we've observed, we've heard, what people are deep listening about, we've experienced. And now the idea is to take all of that and understand and bring that to a level of action, right? So how do we move from empathy to action? So I'm going to start with an example of a study we did for a pet care company. This study actually won some awards, so I can tell you it is Mars that we did this for. And it was the study of animals and their pets, families and their pets, right? And what was the relationship between these families and their pets? I can tell you, we went into this with some hypotheses, and it was exactly what I told you guys not to do in the beginning, right? We went in with an agenda which was all about, this is about value. Pet food is about how cheap it can possibly be. So we wanted to just understand the relationship so that we would know how to communicate when we start really, talking about the value of these products. So I'm going to let you see this this video.
Torta! Vem cá, meu amor! O que tá acontecendo nessa casa, mamãe? Quem tá em casa bagunçando você? Hein? Oh, coração. Totoquinha, vamos dormir? Vamos dormir? Isso. Vamos dormir com a mamãe? Vamos dormir com a mamãe.
Vem, Lico. Vem. Vem, papá, vem. Ó que gostoso, ó. Vai, papá, Lico, vai. Agora eu tô fazendo do Júnior. Ó, a mesma carne.
Ele parece um bebê. É tudo dele. É do Roger. Não é de você. É do Roger. Já fala na cara pra não vir querendo comer.
Meio de carne moída? Eu amo carne moída. Então, pode pôr aí pra mim umas 3 vezes na semana. Eu faço.
Agora pro Roger faz todo dia.
Eu já pesquisei na internet que alho, que a gente usa muito comida com alho aqui, mas alho e cebola pro bichinho, para qualquer animal faz mal. Depois que eu vi que fazia mal, eu parei de colocar. O gato não tem ração, é só isso. Pro cachorro, eu vou tirar um pouquinho só e misturar com a própria ração dela, que ela come mais. Lembra que a gente colocou no Google e aí apareceu essa, a gente viu os comentários e acabou pegando essa.
So we left that study with a whole nother thing, right? This was not about value. This was about a deeper connection between pet owners and their pets. They were cooking food for them. In fact, my favorite part of this is the scene where the son says, yeah, that's the food she cooks for the cat, not for me. We're not allowed to eat that, right? So there was a whole nother level of relationship going on with this one that we weren't really aware of, but it totally changed the strategy. The strategy now became about convincing people that this was the closest thing to fresh meat. And we ended up placing these packages in the freshest part of the supermarket. Totally changed the way we thought about things. By doing that, there were some serious results, right? In Brazil, we had a $10 million increase just in that first year one. And globally, another 110. So it was just something that we hadn't gone in thinking about. It was sort of counterintuitive if you think about it, but that's what people wanted. That was the need. The need was, can I have something that I can add to what I'm cooking up? The need was, can you give me something that makes me feel as good about what I'm serving my pet as it does when I'm sitting there cooking it up for them? So again, I think moving from all of these things that we've done, seeing, hearing, and experiencing, moving from that into action. How do we now do something that relates to all those things we've seen and felt and heard, is the way to actually use your empathy in a way that can build your business. So this is the Ipsos model that I talked about earlier. I've called it an immersion instead of an immersion, because I really think if we go into these things with this lens of empathy on, it might take you to a slightly different place. You can start with some training that's all about building your empathy muscle, right? Just do that for a morning. Let's really everybody start thinking about what that looks like and practicing some deep listening experiences and some observation things. Then it's about experiencing and actually being with these people. What can you do to make sure that you are spending time, as we talked about in the beginning, spending time with these people on an ongoing basis? And then doing some kind of empathy to action exercise or workshop. Let's sit together. Let's talk about some of the things we all heard and recognize some of those patterns that we talked about. And then building that into real action-oriented things that we can do to actually build a business. And I would recommend that through all this, that we maintain this notion of always being on. I think there's something about a culture of empathy that talks about how you might just have ongoing ways that people can continue to connect, make it easy for them, and to keep going. So that's my presentation for now. I think I'm going to turn it over to Hubert, who's going to help us with the team and tell you how you might be able to take this further. Hubert, are you there?
Yes, thank you, April. I'm here, so good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, April, for the very insightful presentation. So I hope everyone in the call found some inspiration and some ideas as to how empathy can greatly benefit each of our business. Yes, I'm taking this opportunity to briefly introduce you to our Ipsos Switzerland qualitative team. It's a team made of 15 experts, and they are located in both the French side and German side of Switzerland. Below, on this slide, you can see or meet virtually our most senior staff, and you can quickly observe that we have a wealth of experience and cultures represented here. So all 4 people have in common, I would say, their passion for qualitative research and for people, but all comes with a different background and come from different nationalities, which brings a lot to the team. In terms of coverage, in case you wouldn't know, we are partnering with both international as well as local clients, and as such we do run studies and projects both internationally as well as at Swiss level, local level. Last, but I would say very important, our team belongs to the Ipsos Global UU Qualitative Network, and it's a big network, a big community of more than 1,000 experts across 90 countries, and they are all qualitative experts, bringing the, I would say, local touch, which is essential when you want to talk about people and about truly connecting and understanding people. So I would say that's my very short pitch about the team. The people are there, experts are there, and they are, we are really keen to connect with any of you who would be interesting to discuss further. Now I think we should move to, we still have 4 minutes, so we should move to the questions, and I think there has been a few questions in the chat box, so I will start with with the first one. And the first one, April, is really about related to the current COVID context and I would say environment, and also the recommendation to minimize social contacts. So talking about empathy is a bit counterintuitive. So how do you reconcile this? How do you recommend to talk to people or to be close in the current environment, basically?
Yeah, so I would say empathy is not counterintuitive. In fact, I would say right now it's more important than ever. But to your point, and it's a really good one, is how do you connect, right? How do you stay? And we used to do this face to face. And I will tell you that it's been interesting running the business that's all about face to face contact, but we've shifted very quickly into what I've called heart to heart. So it's I'm no longer in the room with you, but having people send us videos, send us pictures, talking to them on their, through Zoom and Teams and all of that, has really actually opened the door to some other things. It's actually some of these studies, and a lot of what I've shown you today has been taken during the COVID crisis, right? The other thing we've been able to do more of is longitudinally seeing what's happening with people. So, for example, we did a wonderful study on insomnia, which was really interesting because we would not have been able to see all of what we saw with people's experiences face to face. I think that combined with what you can do through video, through pictures, through people actually showing you moments, has really opened up a different way for us to get connected and to get close to people. So I would argue there's definitely ways of doing it. I don't think it's the same. I think when we're through with all this, we're going to come up with some kind of hybrid that allows you to do both. But now's a great time because empathy is really necessary.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. The second question is somehow related to the first one, and it's more about someone who is who used to be traveling heavily, having a global role, and say, how do I stay now connected to the people I serve? So said differently, is it possible to build empathy when you can't be face to face? And I think most of what you said before would apply here. At least that's what we have been experiencing in our day-to-day business in the past 6 months, but maybe you want to add something here.
Yeah, so we've had programs for people who travel, right? Where when I'm in another country, can you connect me with someone there, right? So that's been things that we've done in the past. What I found lately, though, is particularly for high-level people, busy executives and, CMOs and so forth, they're actually doing more of this now because they have a little more time on their hands and they have the ability to connect with people in all kinds of countries at all kinds of times. So all they do is ask for, I need to understand a little better of what's going on in this country, and then we can connect them with that person through Teams and through Zoom and so forth. So it's equally, available in that sense, and in some cases you could probably do it more often because you're at your desk, you're in your home offices. So it might even be another opportunity that you might not have had before.
Thanks. Okay, so I see it's 2:15, so maybe let's take a last question because there is a lot of activity. So one interesting here, someone belonging to a mid-sized organization. So are you also implementing smaller scale empathy program for smaller clients, and how would you recommend it looks like to start with? So different, different, and whether you can go with smaller scale, I would say, or does it need to be a very large and big program?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so we purposely built this as modules, right? So if all you wanted, first of all, I gave you some tips and tricks today that you could take immediately and go do. And I think we'll be sharing the deck. Yes, Hubert?
Yes.
We'll share the deck with you guys so you can have that. Again, if it's just things to have in your mind, and you can start to execute that with your teams. But we built this modularly. So if what you wanted to do was just a half-day training session, you could just do that and then start thinking about how you can do stuff with your team from that training. If what you wanted to do was more of a experience in the afternoon where we spend time with people, or we connect you with people for a given 4-hour period or something like that, we can certainly set that up. Or we can go to a longer term program so that there's this constant connection that people are able to do. But there's a million different ways you can break this up. And yes, it could either be done in small pieces, or it can be done in a bigger program. I would recommend that if nothing else, you start doing some small things to get this going within your organizations.
Thanks, April. So I guess we will stop there. So we are up to the end of this session. So I will hand over to Martin. Thanks again, April. Martin, floor is yours.
Yeah, and thank you also from my side for these very inspiring questions. And thank you, of course, April, for the presentation, and Hubert for introducing the team and bringing the voice of customer to this Q&A. This webinar was a part of a series of webinars we are conducting this year. For example, we talked about sustainability, distinctive brand assets. What has been mentioned is that we will share the recording as well as the deck in the next couple of days. So please don't hesitate to come back to us for any questions, for anything you want to follow up. And of course, you could always forward this information within your organization. It's a very important topic for all of us. One of the next topics Ipsos will be talking about is a webinar called Keys. This is going to happen next week, and here we are talking about global trends, about shopper and neuroscience. And with that, thanks again for joining today's webinar. It was a pleasure. It's a very important topic, so please enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.